If you're a newbie to spatial audio, I'm sorry, but this video is not for you. I have other videos on binaural mixing and object templates. However, if you're an audio professional with some experience in immersive audio, in this video I'm going to show you my mixing template that allows me to create immersive and stereo mixes all within one session. This is Alex from Alex Pro Mix. Let's go! So let's jump right in, all right? Now, before I begin, let me just kind of give you a little background story. In the first few years of mixing and immersive audio, mixing for Dolby Atmos, it was always a two-stage process. You would have to create your awesome stereo mix. Once the client was happy with it, you would have to export stems, bring it into a new session, and then create your Dolby Atmos mix with 100% plugins. You couldn't really integrate outboard gear. And so it was a back and forth of trying to get the stereo stems sounding like the stereo master, because when you export stereo stems, you don't have the mix bus processing. And if you send your final mix to a mastering engineer, you don't even have that as well. So you're trying to match the tonality of the stems to the stereo master. And it's a tough thing to do. However, there's ways around that. It's always been this two-stage process. Now, the technology has improved since then, since 2021, where Pro Tools added aux-IO, which I'll show you in a minute, and they also added expanded track widths. And what that means is that now you can create a mix template, a folder auxiliary sense that goes to the renderer, but then you can also feed the fold down or the 2.0 fold down into a separate channel and be able to print the stereo master all within the same session. I'm going to show you that as well. But before I begin, I just want to give a shout out to Ronald Prent and George Massenberg, both icons, both legends who have been pivotal to my ability to create this in my workflow in the box and by using outboard gear. I've had multiple conversations with Ronald and with George, and thank you guys. I hope you guys are watching. If so, thank you again for all your input and all your advice. All right, without further ado, let's jump right in. So this is my new mixing template, and I'm going to break down every single aspect of it so that you guys can recreate it in your systems. Now, mind you, I'm doing all this in Pro Tools, and the way that this works in Pro Tools is because I'm using the integrated renderer, I'm using aux-IO, and I'm using folders that route to different channels. So let's dive in. All right, from the top, this very specific to my system is a folder called renderers. Okay, and this contains, the first channel contains EMO. EMO is basically a control remote for the Eventide H9000. I have an Eventide H9000 connected via Dante, which gives me access to 32 channels of outboard processing. These are stereo effects, these are stereo harmonizers, these are stereo compressors, and anything that I want to choose. This allows me to basically integrate outboard gear into my setup and use external effects like reverbs and delays while I'm creating my immersive mixes. It's a very, very powerful and great sounding piece of gear. It's called the H9000, and that's all connected via Dante. Binaural is in a stereo auxiliary track that gets its input from the renderer, this channel right here called Headphones Binaural. Now, what this allows me to do is that when I'm creating the immersive mix, I have this auxiliary track feeding to my audio interface where I can monitor on headphones what the binaural mix is going to sound like and make mixing and creative decisions. Next up is the 2.0. This is also a stereo aux track getting its input from the renderer, the loudness 2.0. 2.0 means that there are two channels left and right. 0.0 means that it omits the LFE. That means that when you create your immersive mix and you're feeding audio or information to the LFE channel on speakers, that information gets dropped out and you only get the 2.0, which is traditional stereo. What this allows me to do is send this to a different set of outputs. You'll see that in a minute. And I can monitor the 2.0 fold down from my immersive mix on meters. I use a pair of Doro meters and I use 2 sets of VU meters. We'll talk about that in a minute. All right, so let's go ahead and close that and go to the next track. The next folder is called reference. The first one is a stereo audio track that gets its feed from the loudness. This is the 2.0 fold down from the Dolby renderer, and it gets monitored on a separate channel So on my control surface, I can switch from immersive to stereo, and I can monitor what my immersive mix sounds like on speakers, and then I can switch to stereo and listen to what my stereo mix is going to sound like through a mastering plugin or through a loudness plugin. So big up to Sam and Stan of Masterplan. Hey, that actually rhymes. And I monitor through this plugin usually around +8 or +10 dB, so that I can hit the stereo loudness, which is much higher than the Dolby loudness. We'll talk about more of that in a minute. This is just kind of a quick overview. Below that is a stereo reference. This is where I put the client's stereo demo mix. This also goes to a separate set of outputs, which is Dante Virtual Sound Card 5 and 6. So what this allows me to do is that it quickly allows me to A/B my live mix that I'm doing in immersive and folding it down to stereo, and then I'm able to monitor and switch to the client's demo mix. This allows me to make creative decisions as to balance, frequencies, what's the organization of the arrangements, what things are important in the mix and things like that. All right, so those are the folders. I showed you the effects folders, which are all the hardware inserts from the H9000, and then this is where all the magic happens. In my system, I have a 714 setup. That's 7 surround channels, an LFE, which is actually 2 subwoofers, and 4 overhead speakers. So I have a 714. I believe Pro Tools allows you to go up to 916. All right, so a folder here that gets its input by the bus called 714in. This can be found in the Pro Tools session templates, and they have different session templates, and that was my starting point, but I modified it. All right, so if I open this folder gets routed to all these other auxiliary tracks. Let's talk about them. Let's look at the first one, 7.0. This is a 7.0 bed. That basically means that anything that I pan in the horizontal plane will go into this auxiliary track, and it will be assigned to the bed. So bed, it's going to be right here. It actually should be this one right here, 7.0, okay? And this gets its input from the folder, but it sends its output to the bed, which is 7.0. The .1 is the LFE. That also gets its input from the folder, but the output of that goes to the LFE channel, which is this right here, LFE. And there's a low ender plugin on that. Super important to use as subharmonic plugin or effect on the LFE channel. And then we have 2 stereo auxiliary tracks. Here they are, top front and top rear. Now, because of the limitations of the Dolby Renderer being only 10 channels, you don't have access to the 4 separate ceiling speakers, like discretely or independently. So you have to create these auxiliary tracks that get assigned to objects. So top front is assigned to object 11 and 12. And as you can see by the panner, it's panned to the height channels in the front. And then top rear gets assigned to objects 13 and 14. And if you look at the panner, it gets assigned to the rear channels, and the height is turned all the way up. So let's put this into action. Okay, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to bring in just a single audio track, a single mono audio track. There it is. I'm muting my channels because I don't want to hear this tone generator, but that tone generator is going. And here's that tone generator, and this is where it's panned. So what I'll do is I'll bring in the Dolby Renderer. There it is, and here's our surround panner. All right, so notice what happens when I pan this sound. It's not an object, it's just a mono audio track. Look what happens when I pan this around using the surround panner. Pay attention to the channels that are being highlighted here on the meters. Check it out. Goes to the left, center, right. Let's bring that down to the right side, rear side left, left side. Cool, and if I put it in the center, it's gonna see there. All right, cool. Now watch what happens when I increase the height parameter. It goes to the object, and that object pans to that specific speaker. So let's go ahead and pan that to the right. It's gonna go to the top right rear, top right, top left rear. Cool, there it is. So I can pan any sound anywhere. It goes to this folder, and then that folder does all the routing and sends it to the bed, and also sends it to objects. Now let me pause right there. What this means is that I can take a multi-track session. I can take multiple individual tracks, I can create an immersive mix by using the surround panel in Pro Tools. And up to this point, I'm able to create an immersive mix, all right? I'm not using objects for like, oh, let me put this shaker in an object 13 and this percussion object 14 and the vocals object 30. No, I'm sending everything to this folder, and then this folder takes care of where the sound should be placed in the bed and the objects that are basically assigned to the overhead channels. Cool? So that's the most basic use of this. We'll bring in some stems in a minute and we'll actually do some practice, but get your mind wrapped around that concept. Cool? In order for that to work, all the channels that you bring into Pro Tools, all the tracks have to go to this output, which is called 714N. So let's take a look at that in the Setup IO. We're gonna go to Setup IO in Pro Tools. Let's go to Bus. And this is it right here, 714N. Again, you can grab this, you can take a screenshot of that and create it yourself, but you can grab this from the Pro Tools session templates as a starting point. Then the 714 out is what gets fed to those auxiliary tracks. Let's take a look. Out LFE, which is this right here, and then out front and out rear front, which are LTF, RTF, LTR, RTR. Cool? The naming here is not so important as much as it is what you do here in the folder. So this output goes here, and then all these auxiliary tracks are being fed by that routing. So the LFE is being fed by 714 out LFE, and then it's going out to bed LFE, and so forth. Cool? All right, so that gives you guys an idea how that works. Let's go ahead and close this up. Now let's take a look at our reference channel. Here's our stereo master. Remember, I told you guys that you can create an immersive mix and then fold it down to stereo and monitor that through a limiter plugin at a higher loudness and be able to reference that in real time. So let's talk about the routing here. All right, so notice how these outputs for the bed are basically going to the Dolby renderer, and they're going here, okay? Now that Dolby renderer in my system is going out here, A Studio 1 through 12. So I use the Matrix Studio with the HD native card, and the first 12 channels are assigned to my speaker playback, and when I'm monitoring through the HD native via the Matrix Studio, I'm hearing my mix on speakers, all right? Now, because of aux.io, I also have Dante Virtual Sound Card, which is another virtual interface that gets routed to the same audio interface in Matrix Studio. Now, the beauty of that is that these right here, the DVS 1 through 16, which are Dante Virtual Sound Card, don't feed back into Pro Tools. They just go through a separate output on my audio interface. So on my monitor control surface, I hit a button, I hit DL714, and I'm hearing the mix in real time on speakers in my immersive room. Then I hit stereo, and it's feeding the Dante Virtual outputs. And then I hit reference, and then it's feeding the demo mix through a different output. So let me show you how that's routed. All right, so here's binaural. The input of binaural is set to re-renders headphones, which is coming from the Dolby renderer. And the output of that is going to DVS 7 and 8, okay? Same thing with the stereo. Same thing with the stereo master, DVS 3 and 4, DVS 5 and 6, 7 and 8, 9 and 10. So I have 4 sets of separate outputs that are going to a different audio interface, if you will, or different virtual sound card. And then those are returning on my monitor control, and I'm able to monitor those in real time, all right? Now, it might work differently with Focusrite, with Prism Sound. It might work slightly different with Apogee, but the same concept still applies. If you use aux.io, you can set 12 channels for your dedicated outputs for your speaker system that are calibrated and tuned to the Dolby spec. But then you can also create this aux.io setup so that you can route it to a virtual sound card and then bring those in on your audio interface for your headphone playback on binaurals or monitor on stereo. Cool? All right, enough of that. All right, so up to this point, this is working. I like it. Let's go ahead and bring in some stems. All right, so I have some stems right here. Let's go ahead and activate those. And notice that in order for that to work, everything is routed to 714, okay? Everything's going to this folder. So I'm just gonna bring up the Dolby renderer. Another thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to group these tracks to a trim. This is part of my template. Let's go to trims, there we go. And with my control surface, I can basically gain stage my entire mix. So with one fader, I'm able to adjust the stems mix. Okay, so let's go ahead and play that on speakers and show you guys what this sounds like. Cool. All right, cool. So I'll let the music play in the background, but basically while I'm gain staging this, I'm taking a look at my Doro meters and I'm looking to where it's averaging around 0 so that I have plenty of headroom. I'm looking at my VU meters to the right. The first set of VU meters is showing me the 2.0 loudness, if you will. So as long as those two sets of meters are in a healthy level, then I know that I'm at the right level for my immersive mix. Now the other set of meters, 3 and 4, are monitoring the stereo fold down, which is this guy right here, through the mastering chain. So this allows me to hit a target of, you know, -12, -10, or even louder, depending on how much I boost this. And in real time, I'm actually able to record the stereo master and, you know, and then have my immersive mix. So let me give you an idea of that. If I record that, that's the stereo master or the stereo fold down from my immersive mix. If I mute, like, you know, all the channels, then, you know, that gets fed there. If I turn this up too loud, that happens, right? So you guys can see this is like an actual representation of a actual print track coming from the Dolby renderer fold down, the 2.0 fold down. But I'm monitoring it in real time with a mastering plugin so that I can hit that loudness and kind of get an idea of what the master reference is going to sound like. Cool. Let's go ahead and delete that. Cool. So that's how that works. All right. Now, if you paid attention to the renderer, there's nothing going on. Everything's going to the left and right channels. That's because everything right now, the stems are just going to the front. But let's go ahead and start just creating some basic panning moves and just kind of get things going on in the immersive environment, all right? So let's go ahead and play this again, and I'm just gonna make some creative decisions about panning and placement. Here we go. All right, cool. So that gives you guys an idea. Basically, there's stuff going on here, okay? So we're not going to dwell on the mix necessarily, but you can see how this is working. As I pan things around the room, as I use this immersive panner, this surround panner, it basically positions things where they need to fit and where they need to belong. Cool? All right. Now, how do we affect or how do we monitor the binaural mix, which is extremely important? Well, let's take a look. So for that, you have to open this, you have to click I/O, and then these are the binaural settings. So because I'm really heavily relying on the bed, the Dolby renderer bed, and not on objects, you know, I have to be very deliberate as to what my binaural settings are. And they do change from song to song. There's not a one size fits all. It's really more of a creative decision. But as I'm monitoring the stereo reference and I'm monitoring my binaural mix in real time, because I can do that now with this setup, I'm able to make decisions if, like, maybe the shakers are panned to the height speakers, but they sound too roomy. Well, guess what? I'm going to adjust the binaural settings. And in fact, that tends to happen a lot. So I pan the shakers up and it's set too far. Let's go ahead and bring it down to near. I'll do the same thing with the back ones. And for the most part, everything else I'm going to leave alone, which is basically LRC, which are going to be set to off. I don't want any binaural effect on those main channels, which are usually like the vocal stem, the bass stem, and the drum stem. Left side, right side, those are set to near. left side rear and right side rear are set to mid, and then the overhead channels, which are not really being used by the bed because I'm using the overhead channels by objects 11 and 12, so those can be just set to off. Cool. That's a starting point. Again, it's not a one size fits all, and then if I choose to use sounds to other objects, then I can change them there. Now, before I forget, why is this so radical and why is this so like important? Well, let me show you why. Because everything is going to this folder. Well, guess what? I can put a plugin on that folder. And guess what? Any effects that I do on that happens to the entire immersive mix before it gets fed to the render. Check it out. Isn't that so cool? So this is the poor man's musician cheat of mix bus processing and immersive. Because I'm feeding everything to this folder, any plugin that I use on as an insert will affect the entire immersive mix. And that is just phenomenal. That means that I can use stuff like this guy and really affect the harmonics of the mix. Now to do that before with objects and mono tracks and stereo tracks, I mean, it was a headache. I mean, it really was a headache. But doing it this way, it's like, oh my gosh, man, I can just like affect the entire immersive mix with one sweep. Now, it's not flawless, all right? And let me show you why, all right? If you click on the inserts, you're gonna notice multi-channel plugins. The plugins that you use have to be 714 compatible, and there are a few that do that. For example, PSP Oral Comp is 714. EQ, let's go to EQ, there's no EQ. However, like multi-mono plugin for EQ and saturation is perfectly fine. I can use any EQ, it's gonna say mono, and the reason it says mono is that it puts a mono instance across all those 12 channels, okay? I don't know. Let's just try, you know, like 8200, which is this guy right here. All right, so this is a multi-mono instance. It's not a multi-channel instance. It's a multi-mono instance. Let's go ahead and take Spectre out. And same thing applies. I can apply filters. I can use the global de-esser if I want, and it's going to affect the entire mix. So let's go ahead and play that back again. Look, the same thing happens with saturator. So we'll put Saturn. It says mono. That's basically a multi-mono instance. And let's just do, here I'll use one of my presets. We'll do Fatter Master Flat. And so it's separating by bands, like a multi-band compressor, a multi-band saturator, but it's applying it to the entire immersive mix. Cool. So as you can see, this works and it's super awesome. This is like super, super cool. All right, that's how you get a cheat around mix bus processing for immersive using a folder. Now, I told you guys about my hybrid setup. So what's cool about that is that, for example, I can take this drum stem, I can solo it. Let's go ahead and take this off. Let's go ahead and play it. Cool, we got a drum stem, it's panned to the left and right. It sounds nice, I like it. There's no beef, there's no problems with it. However, I want to be creative, right? So I'm going to duplicate this track. I'm going to pan it to the rear channels. Let's go to the side channels just for fun, okay? And I'm going to use a hardware insert. Now, I have a number of hardware inserts that you can choose from. For this example, I'm going to use the MPX. We'll use 1 and 2. And that's just basically calibrated at -20 in a flat setting. And I'm basically adding a tube harmonic distortion by using an outboard piece of gear to this drum stem, and I'm panning it to a different place in the room. Right away, that hits, and I'm hearing it off these 2 side speakers, all right? Let's go ahead and EQ that in a particular way that works good for us. And then we'll also compress it. Cool, and then let's bring that in with the original drums. So by using my control surface, I'm turning down this fader. I have the drum stem pan to the left and right channels, and on the second fader, I have the same drum stem with outboard processing and semi-Q and compression pan to the side channels, and I can blend the 2. Here we go. So there's a drum stem pan to the left and right channels, and here's the drum stem with the processing, outboard effects processing, outboard saturation processing, pan to the side channels. Now I can do whatever I want. I can take that drum bus that's being processed and I can bring it up to the height channels by using the panner. And that's it. And it works, and it's awesome, all right? And that's how you incorporate outboard gear into your hardware inserts. Here I have a bunch, all the other ones from the H9000, and that's it, you know. And all this right now is basically able to be recorded into a stereo master. So let's go ahead and hit record again and hit play. All right, guys, so that's all the time that we have for this video. I really, really, really hope that you learned a lot from this on improving your immersive mixing workflow. If you have any questions, which I'm sure you do, please be sure to leave those in the comments. If you're experienced with immersive audio and know the answers, please answer those questions below as well. And let's just really help each other to grow this immersive format and push it forward. Thank you guys so much for watching. I look forward to your feedback and your comments. I'll see you again real soon. Peace.